Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So I think it's high time that we seek some answers regarding Six. Six is a member of the Nine, one of the cosmic interdimensional consciousnesses that is attached to each of the planets of Sol. They are godlike, extra-dimensional, and mysterious. There are a lot of things that we don't know about them, but there are a lot of things that we've lately learned about Six, who is bound to the outer giant of Saturn. In particular, I think there are a few questions that need to be answered about his role in the Fate Saga thus far, as well as his role in Heresy. But I know that some of you are lacking even the most basic information about Six, and I also planned to continue the video series where I tell you about the individual members of the Nine. So, let's talk about Six, starting from the basics, and leading up to the really big juicy stuff, including everything to do with the Lord of Every Nothing, and his interactions with Dredge and Bale. And of course, in case it wasn't already clear enough, spoilers from here on out. After watching the content of some other people within the community, I realized just how important it is to outline the basics when it comes to talking about the Nine. And so for some of you, the most important question of all before we can get to all the juicy stuff is really simple. It's who is Six, or what is Six? Well, as I said at the top, they're bound to the planet of Saturn. They're one of the outer orbits of the Nine, joined by Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune. If you want to just think of them as planets, that'll make it a whole lot easier. But the reality is there's a lot of complicated stuff to do with the Nine generally. The outer orbiting members of the Nine are the members of the Nine that are disinterested in humanity, and see existence bound to the gravity of the planets and the people of Sol as a prison that they must escape. They intended to do this long ago by breaking into a higher reality, namely one found on the other side of a black hole. If they were to break into such a reality, they might be able to make their own worlds and determine their own existence by their own rules. But they have failed to be successful, especially after the Edge of Fate, where we stabilized the singularity at the heart of Kepler, saving the Ionians and the system at large. As it stands, the outer orbits have divisions within themselves. Six is most closely aligned with Five, aka Jupiter. Both act imperiously and treat humanity as little more than specks of dust, or in the case of Six, as vermin to be killed. This might need to be all that you know, and it might be the end of the story for some all in itself. But Six is a member of the Nine that has been building within the narrative for quite some time, and so with that in mind, and with them taking a role as a clear antagonist of the Fate Saga, I wanted to also say that this is likely to be only an introduction to their story. A few more basic things on the Nine that one should know. They exist within the fourth dimension. This means that they are able to view all of time in the same way that we're able to view the two-dimensional planes of a painting. They are able to perceive the entire timeline, just in the same way that we're able to perceive the entirety of a 2D plane. They know everything about their lives, from their conception all the way to their death. You should also know that Six has been bound up with unsavory influences. We'll go on to talk more about it, but Six has been bound into the gravity of Saturn, and as a result, has seen the interplay between various forces, namely the battles between gods and queens. When the Hive god Oryx arrived in Sol, he brought with him his mighty dreadnought, as well as all the power of his lineage. To face him, Queen Mara Sov rose to do battle, and then so did the Guardians of Earth. When the Taken King lay defeated, his titanic body was left to drift within the rings of Saturn for years, before it was finally abducted by the Black Fleet into the same eversion that claimed Titan. It might have fallen to the seabed beneath that strange moon's methane oceans, but all the while, the eyes of the Nine were watching. Six was watching. There is perhaps no event that was of greater importance to the story of Six thus far, which might be strange to hear given that there is no immediate connection between Six and the Taken King and his power, or at least, there wasn't. Of all the many people that Oryx wronged, Six was not amongst them. He looked upon the Taken King, fallen as he was, and seemingly saw something worth studying. In particular, Oryx's power. To learn more about Six and his role in Renegades, I think we do first need to go back though. We need to understand what happened in both Edge of Fate and Heresy. I believe that to get a better understanding of things, we should go all the way back to as far as we can, which is heresy. After the defeat of the Witness, our Guardians investigated the Echoes, paracausal forces containing both the energy of the light and darkness. They would scatter out across the system, and one of them would eventually raise the spirit of Oryx, the Taken King. It would continue to haunt and possess the Dreadnought until it was eventually destroyed by us. But in that time, there were rumblings of something else. We were not the only ones who were racing to take possession of the Echo. Savathun and Xivu Arath would push forward and send their legions to attempt to claim their brother and the power that he had once wielded, the power that as an Echo he still did. But there was something else, something controlling the Dread, and more pressingly above all, the Taken. Even the Echo could tell this. More pressingly still, it could tell that the Taken were being summoned, and that they were somehow different from the ones that it had learned to control. It was obvious for anyone to see that they were new and strange, distorted into new forms, and referred to as Dire Taken from then on outward. However, the Echo of the Navigator King of the Hive also told us new revelations. You see, the Taken King Oryx had been one of the few figures in the history of Destiny that previously learned the power to take, and also communed with a godlike entity of staggering power known as the Winnower. The Hive know it as the Deep. It is presumed that the Winnower was one of two ancient beings that might well have been behind the creation of the universe. More importantly for our purposes, the Winnower might well be the source of the Taken that we have known thus far. To understand what comes next, you must understand the process of taking, and you must also know that it is a process of abduction. To take something is not to corrupt it. Technically, taking something is to evert the target. In other words, teleport it between dimensions, taking it from our material plane and placing it somewhere within the deep, the Ascendant Plane's darkest reaches. In that place, seemingly at the hands of the Winnower, it is then hollowed out, filled with dark power, and given a new, more vicious shape. That was until the time of heresy, when we learned of something utterly staggering that has changed some of the foundations of the universe itself. The new Dire Taken supposedly do not respond to the call of the Winnower.
We are not alone in the deep. Something I cannot see stands between the Winnower and the Taken. Carve these offerings free from their weakness, King, before something else does. I know the wills of every knife in this realm. I hear them scream as the strong metastasize the weak. And I feel a strength I do not know, carving paths that should belong to the Winnower, but don't.
Amongst those who have searched for whispers of the Winnower for quite some time, the idea that there was something capable of eclipsing the Winnower's power, it set minds ablaze, and a hunt would commence for answers. That hunt would culminate in the discovery of hidden texts deep within the Dreadnought. They were taken in origin, and they were known as the Songs of Descent. They chronicled how the Taken were left leaderless in the wake of Oryx. They cried out for leadership. It was their one true desire. You see, the Taken are like animals until someone exerts control over them. When this happens, their only objective is to serve the will of their master. In their lack of purpose, the Taken were lost, and their wailing grief in their listlessness would call out across the Ascendant Plane, begging for a new master. And their desires would spread like ripples across water in this psycho-mutable realm, where that which is believed, that which is thought, is eventually made true. And so in time, those ripples would find the edges of the Ascendant Plane, and would return, reflected back. Explaining what happened next is complicated, but the short version is that by doing so, by desiring within the Ascendant Plane someone that could lead them, The Taken appeared to have willed a new force of command into existence by the sheer magnitude of their reflected need for a leader. Like some terrible inverted mirror, the Taken manifested a new god that would command them, a new god of their own making, a new god that would make them sharp and full of purpose again. By the end of the Songs of Descent, it had come so far as to recognize its purpose within the world, and its plans had begun to unfold. It planned to use the Taken and acquire so much power that it would be able to exist without caveat, without the need for their worship or adoration, without the need for the power of their offerings of violence. And in that moment, it gave itself a name, a title, the Lord of Every Nothing. This was accompanied by a surge of Taken growths all over the Dreadnought, a surge of Taken growths that looked like massive, lumbering tentacles reaching through the Ascendant Plane and the blights that permeate it, as if seeking to grasp the very fabric of reality itself. Even at this early point in the investigation, it was something of an open question if the Lord of Every Nothing was a member of the Nine that had gone rogue. What's more, these questions arose even further in the times of Edge of Fate, when we saw the remnants of 3, and realized how hard it was to not shake the idea that there were visual similarities, proportions and shapes to be approximations of tentacles that we had seen before. And it's here that we come to the most obvious source of knowledge about the member of the Nine that might seem to be responsible for what happened: the lore entry concerning Six himself. This can be found in the Epochs and Orbits lorebook. It reads as follows. Consciousness flows between glistening rings and an ascendant mirror that reflects captured notion as caricatured nature. You are drawn into an ascendant well, ravenously gulping negative pressure into a supranormal maw, more gluttonous than any mass point-driven drive. Welcome, grey meat. I am Six, who spans the birth and fall of corporeal deities aplenty. The rings of Saturn pass beneath you. The planet looms large ahead. You sit in the cockpit of an awoken interceptor as the Dreadnought's eversion wave crashes over the fleet, taking you, taking the Queen. You watch as 6 light-bearers stand triumphant, your body eroding away into non-existence. The weight of my prison is known to no other bound in the shadow of mass, even the fiery pomp of self-import. My freedom is due. The Dreadnought wriggles and wriggles as worm, as Akka, as petrified life. It is not so different a prison than an unliving planet, a throne, a world, alive in the agonizing stillness of once distant death. You must rip out. I am nourished by the oldest of sapient wills. My bounds contain the extent of their secrets. Saturn, reflected in Ascension, drinks from the taken wills and dreaded offerings. I harbor no fear for you, for in the end, fate is made by the strong, and you are only flesh. A great blade is extended before you, surrounded by many broken others. No weapon can kill what is woven into the fabric of existence. No shackle can halt my divergence to an ascendant orbit. This I have learned from that which gives rise to itself. You hold the blade. The traveler hangs without orbit, without motion against the system. You feel the fervor of a mind raised by the sword. When you are told to kneel, remember who stands above you, for we have known many things that kill you. You crash to reality. and death. This communication from Six is not at all unusual. Six has always treated us aggressively, and whilst the other 9 were all content to slowly arrest their control of us and allow us to continue at the end of these lore entries where each of them addresses us, instead, Six actively kills us by the end of its period of communion and control. Were we a normal human, that would be it. As a guardian, we can luckily survive, but that still shows its open contempt for us. And of course, from here the theories only got stranger and more prevalent. We know now Six was commanding Dredgen Bale and was essentially using him like a tool for his own devices. Bale was tithing to Six using the power of a trick that Six picked up from observing Oryx, or perhaps from somewhere else. That trick is well known to us Guardians. It is known as sword logic. With enough accumulated power and death tithed to it, Six would be able to eventually form exactly what it wanted, an escape from this reality. This was only made more pressing in the time of the Renegades by the pressing presence of yet more of those taken tendrils found aboard the dying dreadnought. Only this time, they have been seen across the lawless frontier, particularly on Europa, where they have been snaking back and forth across remote Barant Imperium bases, and on Mars, where a giant gaping pit has formed, with the tendrils spilling out from its central maw. So with all of this coming to the forefront, there are some clear clarifications that arise from certain questions. And I think the biggest question of all is simply this: is Six the Lord of Every Nothing? To that most pressing of questions, I want to put forward an answer. An answer which I think is grounded in the lore, but one which I think is contrary to what most might think, and what most might currently say. I believe that no, the Lord of Every Nothing is not Six, but I do believe that they're connected. Let's talk about why. First of all, I think we need to understand some things based on what Six has said. The first of which comes from that Epochs and Orbits lore book, namely the bit where Six says, "No weapon can kill what is woven into the fabric of existence. No shackle can halt my divergence to an ascendant orbit. This I have learned from that which gives rise to itself." If the implications of the Taken willing their own god into existence is correct, then this statement is essentially implying that Six has learned from the Lord of Every Nothing itself. One might then speculate about the nature of the tentacles across the system, and their Taken origins, and what they might prove. If Six isn't the Lord of Every Nothing, then why do we see its tentacles all over the system? It's an interesting point to bring up, but in this context, I think I want to compare Six to Oryx, and the Lord of Every Nothing to the Winnower. All things with the Taken are a bit like the branches, trunks, and roots of a tree. Each Taken, be they dire or normal, is like a leaf or a twig. They recede into major branches, and eventually they all converge upon our metaphorical tree trunk. In our analogy, this is representative of powerful individuals capable of controlling the Taken in some regard, be they Oryx, the Witness, or Six. However, whilst they might hold sway over the Taken across their branches, they are not the origin point of the Taken themselves. For that, we need to look deeper and look at the roots. In this instance, I believe the roots of the metaphorical tree are higher powers that gift the ability to take, teaching it, and also conducting the process of corruption. These powers are the Winnower, or the Lord of Every Nothing itself. They are the only ones that I believe can truly create the Taken, but their presence is not often seen throughout the world itself, only within the Ascendant Plane. To give a more understandable comparison, we've never seen the Winnower directly or felt its explicit influence across the battles of Sol. Instead, we saw the influence of Oryx and his blights. In the same way, we haven't necessarily seen anything of the Lord of Every Nothing's influence just yet, but instead, we're seeing the influence perhaps of one who is controlling the Taken at current, which I speculate is 6. I am willing to accept that this is a bit of deeper conjecture though, especially given the uncertain origin of the giant, floating, lidless eyes within the dreadnought that were literally so terrifying as to cause our guardian to die from fright. But then again, there is even further circumstantial evidence that I think is the most compelling of all, and it's not based in the lore of any passage and meaning. Instead, it's in the explicit words themselves. Basically, Destiny uses grammar within its lore tabs to show which character is speaking at the time. The best examples of this are, oddly enough, the Nine. For example, 3, a member of the Nine representing Earth, always speaks without punctuation but in lowercase letters. It also speaks in a calm and casual tone. Meanwhile, 6 always communicates in all caps and no punctuation. It doesn't even leave a full stop or a period at the end of its sentences. It shouts with an imperious and demanding tone, as if it's been interrupted in the middle of an important task. I want to just compare, side by side, a passage from the end of the Songs of the Descent, which is from the perspective of the Lord of Every-Nothing, and a passage which comes from the perspective of 6, in Epochs and Orbits. Look at them side by side. Look at the way they talk. Notice how 6 communicates with us in its typical fashion, as I've mentioned. All caps, imperiously shouting its commands, with few wasted words, and with a degree of open disdain. Meanwhile, this other text, the Lord of Every-Nothing's text, is completely different. It speaks with mostly normal grammar, minus the lack of a few full stops, aka periods at the end of sentences. And it's also prosaic, not quite poetic, but sometimes it is so. It speaks in verse, and it speaks with intent, and it feels as though it's completely fine with using a few more words to demonstrate the point more visually. The different grammar within the text of Destiny has always implied different characters, and so I can't assume that it's any different here. And what's more, I think we actually need to assess the lines within that final entry of the Songs of Descent to see a few other key points. Let's break it up and talk about it bit by bit. It starts off like this. A silent song, a whispered song, a quiet song in the broken sea, spoken without speaking, by the will without. In this first passage, the bit to pay attention to is the will without. This is another title that is often referencing the Lord of Every-Nothing. It is also something that will come up later. Just remember it for now. The passage continues, "My blade reshaped speaks for me. In inhabited dimensions on the rich fields between stars. A sweep of its arm and atoms scatter. Particles spin entangled. I spin with them." The mention here of a blade is an interesting one. I've always assumed that this referenced Kater, the first subjugator, and so-called first knife of the Reshaped, better known as Eris's killer from Heresy. Regardless of the truth, the blade is similar in metaphor and reference to how the Witness described itself and its relationship to the Winnower. It described itself as the first knife, clutched in the Winnower's hand. The idea of the blade in inhabited dimensions on rich fields between the stars could potentially speak to the fourth-dimensional nature of 6 and the other 9. I'm not so sure if the sweep of its arms scattering atoms is a reference to 6 and Saturn's rings, but it seems plausible. Regardless, I think this is the least compelling section. Unlike the next one, which reads, "Worshippers give praise, idolaters perform rite, give glory and homage to the growing God. Should the edge of my knife go blunt, should the arms of my petitioners lower, should the congregation never sing again, the will lives, the will feasts, the will spins on." This passage is all about the Lord of Every-Nothing and the relationship it has to the lesser beings that gave it power. I'm highlighting this because it is the exact opposite of the relationship that the 9 have to us. In this passage, the Lord of Every Nothing is essentially saying, because of my followers and the worshippers I've accrued, I am growing. But even if they die and stop, I'm alive, and I will still live, and I will still grow. Meanwhile, the Nine's entire existence, and their entire reason for messing around with our narrative and our fate, is all based in the fear of death itself, a fear which the Lord of Every Nothing doesn't display. Six is desperately trying to escape the prison of its existence that is bound to us. The Lord of Every Nothing is saying that even if everything supporting it dies, it will live on. This is the most foundational and fundamental difference between Six and the Lord of Every Nothing. It is, I think, the crux of the argument. The Nine operate in the way they do because they fear death. And in this passage, the waiting song, the Lord of Every Nothing is saying that no matter what, it will continue to live. But the next few lines sort of spell it all out. Pour food in the sea, still I eat. Quiet voice in the dark, still I am heard. You who want power, you who want deity, take shelter in me. As cyclone grows from seed, as currents feed the whirlpool, as planetesimals collect dust, so grows the will without will. And again here, the Lord of Every Nothing refers to itself as the will without will. It states that even if all things are of a lesser nature, it will still keep growing. Take a look back really quickly at epochs and orbits, and you have this line. No weapon can kill what is woven into the fabric of existence. No shackle can hold my divergence to an ascendant orbit. This I have learned from that which gives rise to itself. Interesting. That which gives rise to itself and the will without will. I think this, combined with the knowledge that the Taken basically willed this god into existence by the sheer force of their desire to be led by something, implies that Six is saying that it has learned about the Ascendant Plane and its potential path to ascension from the Lord of Every Nothing, from that which gives rise to itself, from the will without will. Even the sentence, "No weapon can kill what is woven into the fabric of existence," levels with what the Lord of Every Nothing has said about it being able to survive, even if all its worshippers and attendants die. All of this, in combination, leads me to the theoretical hierarchy of the new series of individuals empowered by sword logic. Dredgen Bale and his acolytes and followers are committing violent acts in the name of Six, and thus the deaths that they cause are tithes to it that empower it with sword logic. Theoretically then, Six is the one commanding the dire Taken, and perhaps the one infesting many regions of the system with its tendrils. But Six still fears death, and is attempting to achieve an escape via an ascendant orbit, so that it will never die. A method it supposedly has learned from that which gave rise to itself, the will without will, the Lord of Every Nothing. So no, I don't believe that Six and the Lord of Every Nothing are the same being, but I do believe that they are linked, just as Bale was being manipulated by Six. Perhaps Six is being manipulated by a power from the Ascendant Plane itself. Whilst this is one large mystery potentially put to bed, there is of course another topic to expand upon, the relationship between Six and the Dredgen. I want to explicitly talk about the purpose that Six has for Bale, because he is still out there. He is still alive, even if he's lacking a hand. As Zavala was able to observe with us in the one campaign mission, Six is receiving tithes from Bale. But Lodi speculated about the idea that Six might actually be inviting the extinction event into the system as a means of escaping its prison from reality. Take a listen.
I recognize when someone knows more than I do. Your knowledge has changed the world, Miss Moore. This is Dredgen Bale, that Mr. Drifter is after, what do you think Six wants with him?
As a Dredgen, Bale adheres to sword logic as a method of violence and paracausal growth. Every death inflicted under sword logic tithes that death to a benefactor, and that enables greater subsequent death.
We already know Bale is tithing to Six, and Six wants to use it to escape.
Escape what?
Escape reality. They are beings beyond our perception of matter. Being bound to our reality and dependent on sapient life is like prison. The Outers need a massive singularity to escape through. The one on Kepler was puny.
It will take an immense amount of tithes for the strength necessary to create such a gateway to the Ascendant Plane.
And extinction's worth it.
Bale's ambition is to buy freedom for the people of the city by stopping Guardians from being its immortal leaders. But Six is only worried about escape. And I think that implies that he's going to be completely fine with the Guardians and the entire apparatus of the tower burning to Bale's ambition if it results in the lives of the whole system dying to him as well, and thus fueling his escape. This should be obvious to just about anyone who's been looking at the surface-level lore of Dredge and Bale, and at the fairly obvious fact that Six is clearly manipulating him. Bale's need for approval from a higher authority has left him as easy prey for Six, who is a willing puppet master taking up this marionette, like a spider pulling on the strings of its web. But Bale might actually be treading a road to a fate worse than even he can imagine. Take a listen again to the beginning of the cutscene where Lodi and Eris commune with Six.
I suspected we needed Six. The last emissary to channel them was Xur, and, well, left him changed.
Somehow, Lodi has learned that Six is the one that turned Xur into what he is today. This horrifying mockery and twisted thing that is both alive and yet, according to its own words, dead. And Bale is already being changed by Six.
I've lost too much of myself. So many pieces. My liver, the flesh of my face, what I've lost, he replaces with metal.
The extent of these transmutations across Bale's flesh are almost as numerous and troubling as those taking place across the face of Earth, a topic we'll cover soon as well. However, if we're going to understand them better and to understand everything else about Dredge and Bale, we'll need to go ahead and talk about him as a separate topic. That will be our next larger video, a video discussing the lore of Dredge and Bale himself. You can expect that at some point soon as well. In the meantime though, thank you so much for watching. If there are any further questions you have about Six, go ahead and leave them down below in the comments section. It's possible that I've missed something, but I really wanted to address the idea that Six is the Lord of Every Nothing. I don't believe it to be true, and to be clear, I could very easily be wrong, but I don't think I am. Everything I've seen about the lore thus far leading up to this point makes me believe that Six and the Lord of Every Nothing are two separate entities. But as for what its role in the future of Destiny is, I don't know. That's something that perhaps we can find out together. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like, and if you want more Destiny content, and content from universes near and far, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, has been quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.